Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Larry, thanks so much for being on. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. It's kind of serendipitous being that we're getting into like the Halloween season. And I've come across you and the work and some of the stuff you do. And I thought, you know, really it's so intriguing. Do you want to tell people a little bit about who you are, your background, and what you do?
Sure, sure. And I appreciate you having me on. I'm very excited to be here. First of all, I think to start off with the whole topic of this ghosts paranormal, I think it's important to have an open mind. I'm a cop. I'm a retired cop. I spent 40 years on the job in different aspects of both criminal investigations as well as criminal justice education. This whole thing requires an open mind because we really don't know what it is. And that's kind of how I got into the field. I started off my career working in the Dade County Jail in Miami back, let's just say a long time ago. And just a young kid in there. I actually had my first experience in the Dade County Jail where I saw a person walking down on the catwalk on the fourth floor of the jail where I was assigned that night. And basically nothing see-through, nothing spooky about it. I thought it was our lieutenant snuck up to catch us horsing around or sleeping or whatever. And I hollered to the guys I was working with. They went and checked and they said there was nobody there. And I know what I saw, but it wasn't anything that I thought was spooky or anything. It wasn't see-through, nothing wispy. It would look like a solid person, tall, lanky person in a uniform. But they weren't there when it was checked. So that was my first experience. So I like to tell folks, I know what I saw. I know what I experienced. I've had some other experiences, obviously, since then. And it's something, whether it's the other side trying to reach out to us, whether it's the theory of dimensions, as they excuse me, Einstein has talked about, as well as other scientists, dimensions crossing over. Is it a product of our own mind? We don't know, but it is the greatest mystery of all mankind. What happens after we leave this earth as we know it? And that's, as a detective, that's what I investigate. So that's how I got into it. And like I said, I've been in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement for about 40 years. Finally called it quits about 2020. And that's my experiences that I just described to you, as well as some other ones, is what piqued my interest. And I started investigating it and have a team. And we do out and do research. Research as compared to just going out and having getting scared. There's two different levels there, that we actually try to research what this phenomenon is. And that led to finally about in 2016, after many people asking, like yourself, what's this all about? Can you come talk to our Rotary Club? Can you do a tour for us? That gave birth to what I call the outreach of my investigative group, Indian River Hauntings. And the Indian River Hauntings is the outreach. And we do tours and events and things like that to kind of help introduce people to what this phenomenon is, and also to share the history. The history of Florida and the history in general has to go hand in hand with any research that you do with what this life after death question is. You've got to understand, you've got to embrace, you've got to love history. So it's a combination of two things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I feel like your background really in law enforcement probably has a good influence on how you approached, looking at the paranormal, whether it's around, Indian River County or beyond, or, and with the Florida Bureau of Paranormal, and with, how you're approaching this and how you give tours to people. How do you think that had an effect on your view of
Huge
everything?
Huge effect. When we conduct with my investigative research team, the Florida Bureau of Paranormal Investigation, we conduct our investigations the way I would have conducted a criminal investigation in many ways. It's structured. It has procedures and protocols that we follow, and it's the same mindset, you see, that I would do when I was on the job years ago. So it's been a huge help in allowing us to actually gather information, gather evidence, properly critique it, properly examine it, and then of course preserve it. So absolutely a huge part of it. And that's really, if you go on with us on an investigation, you'll see that there's a procedure that we follow. Everything's written down, everything's documented, things like that. So real important part of it.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. With Indian River Hauntings, how do you, if someone was to come to you and say, Larry, I'm really interested in getting more involved with this, and they're local, like, they're around the area. Are there certain places that you look at and you think, hey, this is a good geographical location to start? I mean, we were talking before about some of the places, Driftwood Resort, or, the Fellsmere School, places that people maybe have heard of. Where do you think people start when they're kind of getting their feet wet?
Well, you start by doing your research, your background. You study. TV shows are great, but understand something about the TV shows. They are entertainment. They give you a real, and that's really what fueled, frankly, the interest as today, that because it's so strong, were the TV shows. But the TV shows are entertainment. So while they give you a great foundation, shall we say, you got to do some research into what this takes, what the equipment's used, or the theories behind the equipment. As far as us, we do take, we have been taking some guest investigators with us on investigations, just to give people a taste of it. But more often we have events and stuff that allow folks to come and join us for, like at the Fellsmere School. We had an event there a couple of weeks ago where folks came in. I did a little presentation up front, and we went to investigate the Fellsmere School and the Marsh Landing restaurant. And we showed folks how to use our equipment and things like that. We've got another event coming up this Friday, the 24th, at Waldo's Secret Garden on 12th Street, where it'll be the same thing. My team will be out there, and we'll do a quick little presentation involving the history of the property. And then we'll break up into teams, and our guests will go with my folks, my teammates, and they'll continue to, we'll show them how to investigate. You got to be careful, because you can't really call those events investigations in the true sense. Because when my team goes out to a spot, we have certain protocols that we set up and we do that aren't really conducive to these events, but it does give people an idea of what we do. And stemming off of that, and I just mentioned it a moment ago, we do on occasion bring folks with us on our regular investigations if they have an interest in it and they want to really learn more how to do it properly.
So what makes those, I mean, you had mentioned the Fellsmere School and Waldo's, and what makes some of these locations, and I guess we don't have to get too much in the weeds, I'm sure there's so much you could talk about with different areas. What makes these places special?
Have you got about 8 hours?
Yeah, right. I was going to say, yeah, maybe for one, it's probably easy to get down the rabbit hole in a lot of these places. But what makes them special? What makes them paranormal in a way?
Well, first of all, the phenomenon, whatever it is around us all the time. It doesn't matter if it's day, night, morning, afternoon. It's 24/7. There's a spot, for example, in Sebastian, the Paradolia Brewery, that we only investigate there during the early morning hours. And I'm talking 7, 8 in the morning. And nobody thinks about doing paranormal investigation that time of day, but that's when they're most active. So understand this is a phenomenon that occurs 24/7. What makes one spot more active than the other? It's hard to say. Sometimes there's more energy there. There's energy that's been trapped that may cause it. The Fellsmere School, we've caught tons of evidence there that the place is filled with kids. All kinds of evidence that kids are there. But the history shows that not one child has ever had a tragedy there. Nobody's died there. Nobody fell out of a window. There was no fire. Nobody was harmed there that is documented anyway. Yet we constantly have contact with kids there. So why is that? Theoretically, understand everything that we do is theoretic. Nobody's proven anything yet. But theoretically, we kind of think that maybe they come back to the school because that's where they were happiest. And maybe they died when they were 95, but they come back at age 10 because that's where they were happiest. Just a theory, but we can't really figure out why they're there. A lot of folks also seem to think if a place is haunted, it's because somebody died there. That's not necessarily true. We've also gathered evidence that said whatever it is, whatever the phenomenon is, travels. It doesn't stay in one place unless it wants to. It can go from point A to point B. Once again, one of those many things that we talk about. We actually for several years did a Paranormal 101 class where we actually spent an entire day just talking about the theories and the philosophies of it, and where we went into more detail of this. So it can be a very, very deep subject, a subject that yet nobody's provided definitive proof yet. What we do in our investigations, for example, is we'll set up equipment and we videotape everything, we document everything, and we kind of hope to get on our equipment the same bit of information in 2 or 3 pieces. That allows us to have some confidence in the information. There's some accuracy to it. And certainly getting this information, we then go back into history and find out if names or situations that have come across our way in these investigations are historically accurate or not. And when that happens, wow, we know we've got something.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a lot to cover too. That's an interesting point though, that you had mentioned, in my head, haunting and paranormal, it's all kind of got this, it's got kind of like a creepy undertone to it. And so the point that you made about, hey, this is a different perspective with the kids at Old Fellsmere School. That's really interesting. And I'm sure, to your point, finding ways to decipher the unexplainable and finding a logical explanation, or finding replicatable data, I guess, in whatever way you can.
Bingo.
Is kind of the first step into trying to
understand. Well, the first thing we do is when we get a piece of evidence, we do everything to prove that there's a logical reason for it. For example, remember the movie Haley Joel Osment, Bruce Willis? I can't think of the name of the movie now. Oh gosh, where the little boy saw ghosts, and Bruce Willis was a psychiatrist.
Sixth Sense? Was it Sixth Sense?
Sixth Sense. That's it.
Right.
You'll notice that every time that the young Haley Joel Osment was about to see a ghost, the temperature dropped. That's because, in theory, when a spirit's trying to manifest itself, it's drawing in energy, and when it draws in energy from the air, the temperature drops. That's where that theory comes from. Yet when we find a cold spot, the first thing we look for is an air conditioning vent, or if it's in the wintertime, an open window, because we look for the logical answers first. If we don't find the logical answers, then we delve on from there. Now you go back to the school for a second, which is probably, in fact, my book, Haunted Indian River County, has the old school on the cover. That shows you how terrific I think that place is. I've got a little boy. There's a boy we call Billy in the place. We call him Billy because that's how he responded to us the first time we made contact. And it was, I think, 2017. One of my team members, a guy named Mark Holt, was upstairs with some of my other teammates. I was downstairs finishing up a tour of some folks. He's upstairs in the auditorium, and he just makes the question. It's got a tape recorder going. Billy, is this the room you like to be in? There were no kids in that school, Josh. And this is on my website if anybody wants to hear it. Is this the room you like to be in, Billy? And you hear a little kid respond saying, yes, sir. Now, there were no kids in that building.
No kidding.
No kids in that building. And you can hear this. I'd put earphones on because it's even more clear. But there it is. How does that happen? Now, it can only be one or two things. I'm faking it, or it occurred. It can only be. And 40 years of law enforcement, my reputation means a lot to me. I'm not going to fake something just for a little bit of fun I can put onto the website. So that was very, very creepy. Another time, that's what we call an EVP. You can't hear it, but it comes. You catch it on a recorder. But there was another time in the basement of the old school. I had 4 people in the room downstairs in the basement of the old school, and there were 4 people, and they were making some comment, and you hear somebody's phone go off. Can I help you? Siri or whatever, right? And you hear 4 adults laughing. And then suddenly you hear a 5th laugh, clearly a child. And all 4 people that were recording said, did you hear that? Yeah, I heard that. Did you hear the kid laugh? Yeah, I did. And one of my folks actually recorded it. And that's on my website also. That's something that you can actually hear without the aid of a recorder. So we get all kinds of crazy things that happen in there that we can't explain. And that's the type of evidence we really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I could see how that's one of those things where it kind of makes you, it's like a positive reinforcement. You put a lot of time into something and something like that
Yeah.
happens. That's pretty
And
exciting.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to ask, and you can kind of take this any way you want, but what do you think? I mean, you've met a lot of people, you've talked to a lot of people in this sphere. What do you think makes people drawn to it? The paranormal here local. I mean, I obviously I'm thinking about that from the perspective of somebody who's here, who's looking at
Mm-hmm.
Fellsmere School or Waldo's or
Mm-hmm.
Driftwood.
Uh, your question is, rephrase that question for me a little bit.
What do you think makes people drawn to it? The paranormal side of some of these places.
Not knowing. Let's face it, the question of what happens after we die has been a question for mankind since the beginning. And it doesn't matter what socioeconomic class, what race, what country, what religion, everybody in all of those sections have experienced, some, not everybody, but people in every one of those realms has experienced something. Not everybody, but people within that. So I think it's the question of what's really out there afterwards. Now, humans also like to get scared. We like excitement. We like the adrenaline rush. Why does somebody jump out of a perfectly good airplane? Can you explain that to me? I can't. Is this much different?
Right.
Going into a haunted house and suddenly seeing that what appears to be a person from 100 years ago appearing before you and then disappearing. It's an adrenaline rush. So there's that part of it. And there's a lot of folks that do it for that reason. I've got no issue with that at all. But then you got folks on my side that are seeing it and saying, what is that? And that's the detective in me. What is that? What's causing that? Is it us? Is it the other side? What are the answers? So that's where I come from. But people just like that thrill too. People like to get scared. People like the thrill of being scared. How long have people been telling ghost stories around a campfire? It's just the human nature.
Yeah, you're right. That's kind of like it almost adds an allure. If you go camping somewhere or you go to visit somewhere and all of a sudden somebody whips out this tale, especially if it's paranormal, all of a sudden it adds a little bit of an allure to the place almost. It adds a little bit more to the trip or to your experience.
So therefore you got two ends of it. The curiosity, the desire to know what the answer is, and just getting the adrenaline rush of being scared. So you get two actions that way. So that would be what I would consider what draws most people, one of those two things. And it's funny, I started doing the tours. We do the tours out of the Driftwood and in Sebastian, and we do events out in Fellsmere. And when I started this in 2016, actually doing the public tours, year or so, I figured everybody would get tired of it. Nope. It just keeps going. And I'm shocked at how often I get people come back 2 and 3 times for the same tour, just to hear it again and experience it. And that's, one reason I wrote the book, not only to kind of quantify or document these stories, but also to share the history. It's not all about ghost stories. It's about understanding our history and how the two things meld together, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's a really cool starting point, to start from the actual history and then build from there. And then within there, there might be some things that maybe need, like you said, maybe need more explaining.
Exactly. And we've run into times where we'll get names on a piece of our equipment, and sure enough, that name crops up in the history books. Wow. I can tell you one other quick story. I don't want to go into where it was, but it was in the Indian River County area. We were called into an investigative spot, and all of our equipment, it would take take a lot of time to explain all the equipment that we were using, but we were getting not only personal information, but information on our equipment of a young child that died in that house, right? Got very excited about it. And when we later were able to go through certain channels, we checked in with the cemetery in the area. The person that ran the cemetery was able to say that somebody had come in looking, visiting another gravesite, but they got talking. He and the superintendent of the cemetery got talking about kids that were buried there. And the name we got, I will tell you this, the name we got during our investigation was Lindy or Belinda, about 5 years old, died tragically, I'll just say. Well, the superintendent in the cemetery calls me after somebody had checked with him and said, I just had somebody in here and they were visiting another grave, but we got talking about kids being buried here. And they told me they had a shirt tail relative that had died many years ago at the age of 5. And her name was Belinda. And he took me to her gravesite. How does that happen? We had no idea she was there. The gravesite is very poorly marked because it was basically a pauper's grave. Wow, how does that happen? And the story is really much more detailed than that, but it is something that's what keeps my blood flowing when it comes to this. That's what keeps me going, because we may have uncovered something there, and there's no way I could have gotten that information from where we were at. And there's a gravesite for a child this age with the same name, same time period. So,
that makes me think of a question that I wanted to ask you, which is because that's a wild experience. But I'm interested if there are any investigations or just circumstances. Well, I guess investigations mostly when you're in these places, then you're looking to know more about, looking for answers that where you have something that makes you feel uneasy or uncomfortable, or maybe it's not like, hey, this is great, we're finding answers or we're learning more about this, but it's something that maybe gives you a different sense.
That happens. There's a lot of there's folks out there that talk about real demonic or evil beings. We've not run across that. I personally have had an incident where something basically almost I won't say knocked me out, but certainly sent me to the ground. And it never happened before. And this was in the old school, and there was a gentleman that was with us. He was on one of the TV shows for a long time, and he'd brought a writer or something with him and asked if he could take a look at the school. He'd been in there once before with us on another event. And we were in there. My son, Evan, was with me, and we were going through there, and we were getting crazy answers on the recorder we had, just really nasty stuff, which we'd never had before in this place. And suddenly I'm just talking and everything starts spinning and I'm going to the ground and my son catches me. And I'm like, what the heck happened? That doesn't normally happen to me. And we started asking questions on the recorder again. Did you do this to Larry? Was what the person asked. And the voice in the recording, and I'm just telling you what it said. You can take it for whatever it's worth. But it said, yeah, and you're next, B word. Male voice. And the same male voice we'd been hearing. And Rob asked, did you do this to Larry? Yeah, and you're next to B word. That was pretty eye-opening. We normally don't have things like that happen. Can it happen? Sure. I guess it can. A lot has to do with the individual and how they're conducting themselves. Maybe if it's something that they're doing if it's something that's happening within their own mind, I can't answer that. But that was a profound experience for me. And it told me that something happened and that I could not explain.
Yeah, that's, and that makes me think too, when you do these tours, and again, if I'm going off in different directions, feel free to say, hey, look, I want to stay on this topic. But it always brings up, another question that I was thinking of when you mentioned the tours. How often do you have people who maybe come out or they help with the investigations or they come in for the tours? And of course, I'm sure most people are skeptical to some degree, or you have to tell them to have an open mind. How do you go through things? How do you deal with skepticism? I mean, I'm sure you seem to have a reasonable view of all this. I'm sure there's plenty of things that happen that you yourself are skeptical about.
Sure.
But for somebody who's looking at maybe go into the tour or is new to it, really that's what I'm thinking of, is people who might be watching this and they've heard of these places, and some of
And
them
they're
might
like,
even
yeah,
heard of you.
right.
And
Uh-huh.
yeah. Which,
Yeah.
to me, this is all, honestly, it's very new to me to an extent, aside from, I know the places all up and down the Treasure Coast that, they're the places that people talk about, but I haven't had an in-depth conversation with someone like you. And I'm
Mhm.
sure a lot of people have that thought. What are your thoughts on that?
Great question. On the tours, a lot of times, a couple will come and the spouse is excited, but their partner is like, I'm here because my husband or wife
Right.
dragged me along. And certainly they're skeptical. And the first thing I say is, I get it. I get it. And not everybody's experienced some things. I have some theories as to why some people do, some people don't. Once again, just theories. But I just talk to them openly. And I do ask them to keep an open mind, saying simply this: we don't know what the phenomenon is. Is it really the other side reaching out? As I said before, is it this dimension issue where there's theoretically, I think, 10 or 12 dimensions that sit next to ours, including ours. And do these dimensions cross over? Is that what it is? Because they're mathematically theorized. Is it just us? And I tell a story about a 1972, I think, event called the Philip experiment done in Toronto, Canada, where a team not unlike mine actually did an experiment where they created a guy named Philip, created a dossier for him, gave him name, wife, kids, whatever, put him in an important part of history. They did an enclosed investigation with witnesses, and they were recording it, and it was using probably 8mm film back in 71, 72. And they started getting crazy things. They got voices, tables were lifting, and something identifying himself as Philip. But Philip was their own creation.
That's very perplexing.
It is. It's not. You
Wow.
can actually look it up. That's a very brief description, and you can probably still find it on excuse me, on YouTube. So two theories came out of that. Was that really just proof that the power, the unrealized power of our own brain, can it create things like this? Or was the other side using it as a conduit? It's just too hard to say. But I do remind people that I don't care where you live. I don't care what socioeconomic educational class you're in. There are people in those classes, in those classifications, that have experienced things. Everybody can't be nuts. It's got to be something, but what it is, we don't know. So I tell people just to keep an open mind and let's take a look at it. Now, I will tell you this. Most of my team that investigates with me regularly came to my events. My lead investigator is a dear friend of mine. His name is Michael Spanky Maxwell, retired firefighter. He came with an event that I would put on a number of years ago with his wife, Tina, beautiful wife, Tina. And she wanted to come to the event. He was like, all right, I'll go. And he came. He had experiences he could not explain. He's the lead investigator for my research team. So,
Wow,
and
that's interesting.
I never try to convince anybody of anything. This is something. How can I convince you when I don't know what it is? Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want you to just keep an open mind and say, look, if it's happening, why is it happening? Let's all find out together. That's my direction on. Let's find out what the answer is. And sometimes people have experiences on our events, and sometimes they don't. It's just one of those things. And it's like fishing, Josh. Sometimes they're biting, sometimes they're not.
Right.
You can't. It's not, once again, like TV where you're going to go in there and automatically you're going to start getting stuff. In fact, I like to describe a paranormal investigation like a police stakeout, something I can talk about with a pretty high level of accuracy on.
Sure.
It's not like it is on TV and movies where you have excitement and bang, bang, shoot them up every second. You will sit for hours and hours and hours and maybe get 30 seconds of that adrenaline rush. Paranormal investigations are no different. You may sit all night and then finally get just 2 or 3 minutes of something happening, and then that's it. You might have something happen all night. You might get nothing. So that's the reality of it, and that's what I try to explain to people.
Yeah, that's a good perspective to have too, because it's I'm sure that's a great analogy when it comes to fishing, at least from what it seems.
Mm-hmm.
What are your events, these events that people come to, are they all public? Do you want to talk a little bit about those before, just because we're gearing up on 30 minutes. I want to make sure we talk about
sure.
those,
Yeah. All right. Well,
the tours, your book.
The tours I do year round, and they're basically historical. We call them historical ghost tours. We talk about the history. We talk about the legends, and we talk about what my own folks have uncovered on the tour area. I only do tours where we've done investigations, so that way I can give you a personal perspective of it. Normally, I bring some of my equipment if people want to give it a try, and I explain how to use it. So those are my walking tours. I do those pretty much all year round in Sebastian and Vero Beach. You go to my website, indianriverhauntings.com, and you can see the schedule on there. I do events mostly around this time of year. We did one in Fellsmere a couple of weeks ago. We've got one, as I said, at Waldo Secret Garden. That event, though, if anybody's interested in joining us next Friday, you got to go to waldosecretgarden.com. That's not on my website. It's on theirs. We're facilitating it, but it's going through Waldo Secret Garden. So those are those public events that we do. The book I mentioned, I'll take a selfless little plug for it, Haunted Indian River County. And this book covers a lot of what I talk about on the tours, quite a bit about my philosophies on the whole thing, and a lot of the history. And probably the thing that I feel is the greatest success about that book is having somebody who has lived in Vero Beach maybe their whole lives, on the history end of it, saying, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about the county. And that's what's been a huge success for me, is sharing that history with others, because that's so important. So that's a little bit about what we do. The events mostly this time of year, but the tours all year round.
That's great. I appreciate you being on, and I appreciate those. Those are probably good closing thoughts to have, because I think you're right. I think at the very least, at the very most, somebody can go to one of your events or a tour, and maybe they pick up a new, maybe something they're interested in that they hadn't thought much of. And then on the other side, they find something where they kind of look more into the history of these places that maybe they've just kind of taken for granted. They pass by them. They've maybe eaten or stayed at some of these places, but they pick up, there's different ways for them to benefit, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's
awesome.
Keep an open mind. Don't say it can't be, because as a cop, every time I thought I'd seen it all, humans have found a new way to surprise me. So keep an open mind. Know the history of where you live, folks. Florida is not all about sand, sun, and mouse ears. Florida is about the history of not only our state, but our country.
That's beautiful. Thanks, Larry. I appreciate you being on, and I'll include some links to some of the stuff that we discussed as well, so people can learn more about it.
Great. And my website again is indianriverhauntings.com.
Perfect. Thanks, Larry. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.